I am going to use this. Oh, he's out in the... My little buddy brought me a cough drop. Well, I have one. Thank you. Different. I was expecting a eucalyptus that's like tangerine. Woo! Oh, well. Life is grand. It is. Never a dull moment, like our missionary friend Phyllis said. I want to have us open our Bibles again to Joshua. And just want to take a few moments this morning. We do have some very exciting things to share today. So I just want to kind of bring some of the things together that we've looked at in the book of Joshua. Moses, even though he exits before the book of Joshua, has a lot to do with the book of Joshua. He has a lot to do with everything that happened in the nation of Israel, going all the way back to the Exodus and even before that, how God worked in his life. When you think about the characters in the scriptures, Moses is one of those that just jumps out of the Bible at you as being an amazing man. A reluctant leader. Remember the burning bush. Lord, this is great stuff, but send who you will send. And he actually God got upset with him. Wow. But Moses listened to God. And he became the instrument of God. It wasn't Moses that delivered Israel, but he became the instrument that God used to do that very thing. Humbled the greatest nation on earth at that time, and had his people walk free, having basically looted the place because they said, get out of here, just take what you want and get out of here. But as you look at the life of Moses and you see his interaction with God and with the people of Israel, it would be easy for us to put him on a pedestal and say, it was just because it was Moses, not to take anything away from him. But in the end, what was so special about Moses is summed up in a few words by God. I've looked, and maybe somebody will find one. I cannot find any other person in the scriptures that God gives the eulogy. Think about that. That's pretty impressive. Most of us will be lucky if somebody remembers to give us a eulogy. But Moses was so special to God that God gave his eulogy. And it's in Joshua chapter 1. Verse 1 and 2. Now after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke unto Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' minister. Now remember, you see, God is speaking here. Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan. Listen to what he said. In the summation of the life of Moses, the greatest thing that God could say of him was, Moses, my servant, is dead. We've talked about the pursuing of the promise. What set it all up, what made it all possible, was a man whose heart was set upon serving God. Exodus 33:11. You don't need to turn there, but I'll read it for you. And the Lord spake unto Moses. Now this is, of course, when Moses is alive. And the Lord spake unto Moses face to face, as a man speaketh unto his friend. And he turned again into the camp, but his servant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, departed not out of the tabernacle. Find me that in the scriptures, where God spoke to a man face to face like he would speak to his friend. And yet, at the end of his days, what was his eulogy? Moses, my servant, is dead. What made Joshua a great leader? He spent most of his life following Moses around. All the way back at the Exodus, you find that Joshua was involved. In the first battle, he was their general. He was probably not much older than a teenager at that time. But already, he had attached himself to Moses. And for years, he followed Moses and learned at his side. And when you read about Joshua, you read Joshua. Now, God didn't say this, but it's recorded in the scriptures, Joshua, the servant of the Lord. I was amazed. I had forgotten. God buried Moses. Think of that. God took him up to the mountain. Deuteronomy 34. You want to read it for yourself, verses 1 to 9. And he showed him the promised land. Remember the sad thing, Moses, in a moment of passion, struck the rock twice instead of speaking to it. And God says, you're not going to be able to go into the land. But I'll show it to you. And he takes him to the mountain heights, and he shows him the promised land. And then Moses dies. And God carries him to the valley and buries him. The promise pursued requires the humility of servanthood and understanding that it's out of our service to God that everything good happens. I was reading this week, and I've always been moved by the account in Matthew of Jesus washing the disciples' feet. We really can't relate to this in our pretty clean culture. Probably all washed your feet today. You probably got a shower or something last night or today. We tend to have access to a lot of good water and soap and cleansing and clean socks. Thank you, dear. I love clean socks. I go through a lot of socks. But isn't it nice? One of the greatest, when I travel, you know what my guilty pleasure is? A pack of new white socks. Never been worn. I wear them once and put them away and take them home. Isn't there something about a clean white sock? Well, they didn't wear clean white socks in the days of Jesus. They wore sandals dusty, dirty roads. I can only imagine, maybe as a kid I could picture that, but their feet were hot, they were tired, they were dirty, they pardon us, but they smelled. Jesus took upon him the service of the lowest of the servants. Even within the hierarchy of a servant's role within a family or within a house, it was the most menial of tasks that was taken on by the least senior servant, and it was his job to wash the people's feet. It was a great pleasure and a great gift to those whose feet were hot and tired and sore and maybe stinky. I know some churches have foot washing, you know. I'm afraid I'd be like Peter. No! And of course, poor Peter, the Lord says, well, if I don't wash your feet, you don't belong to me. And he says, well, wash my whole body. That's Peter for you. And then Jesus said, no, your feet, just your feet's enough. But if you remember the point of all of that, when Jesus finished washing their feet, he said to them, do you know what I've done? Well, the answer would be, well, you washed our feet. No. I've set aside who I am to minister to you. If I, being your master and your Lord, have washed your feet, you need to wash each other's feet. Service. God is looking for some servants. People who will understand the great privilege of serving God. It's been the most incredible privilege of my life. I've had the privilege of serving alongside of great men and women. And it's been an absolute privilege. I think of them, some of them, many of them are in glory. Some of them are still around, but unable to do what they used to do. But Walnut Street has been what she has been because of men and women who have humbled themselves and said, I just want to serve. I just want to serve. The days of our service are numbered. They really are. God knows the number of our days. And he warns us, the night comes when no man serves. He comes back, our chances to serve are done. Heaven is a different economy altogether. What we do here, we will carry there, and it will become the basis of our heavenly experience. Probably 4 to 5 years ago, I started talking to you about the reality of my service. And I knew then that we had to really understand that you just don't go on forever. I love what I do. Pastor Tim and I have had many discussions over it, and it's not like we want to just quit what we're doing. But the reality for me is that I just cannot do what I used to do. I heard what Clark said. I'm so pumped about that. I'm so excited that he's excited about that. Oh my goodness. That just lights my heart up. It's always been a passion of mine, and life takes some of those things away. You can't do what you used to do. And I'm very glad that God has given me the opportunity to serve, and I want to continue to do that, but I've told you, and I need you to understand, that it cannot be continuing on the level that it has been. It just can't. I can't do it. I used to go out night after night after night. Go all day, go out visiting at night. During the summer, we do special evangelistic events in homes. We would have teas, and ladies would gather other friends. I would do 6 or 7 of them in a week. Lots of people got saved through those. I'm excited that someone like Clark is going to come in here, and I hope he will stir some hearts. And I'd love to be one of them, but I'm aware of the fact that I'm not going to be out there knocking on doors at 10 o'clock at night. I'm lucky to see 10 o'clock. So we've been praying for a long time for God to raise up someone that can come in and draw alongside. I don't see myself as a Moses or a Joshua, please. But I do see us having the opportunity to bring along a young man and to help him understand who we are, understand how Walnut Street works, and to have some young legs that could team up with a Clark and some of you younger guys and ladies. Evangelism changes everything. It's as simple as that. So this morning, I want to introduce you to a young man and his family. Pastor Tim and I and the deacons have met with him. This journey goes back, it goes back quite a ways ago. You've already met him. He's been here on 3 occasions as a representative for ABC, the college where Clark is. We got to know him and really enjoyed him and his family. Lovely, lovely people, great spirit, loves the Lord. But in talking with him, he had a post-graduation commitment to the college. I think it was 2 more years after he graduated, he was going to continue on as a student representative. And so I thought, well, that kind of takes him out of the picture. But in January, I received a letter from Peter, and it was like Clark writes, it was a letter sent out to churches telling them what's going on. And he shared in that letter that the college, because they have now 2 children, the college had freed him from his post-graduation obligations. And he was now praying for God's direction in his life as far as the ongoing opportunity for ministry. Well, I read that and I picked up the telephone and I called him. And we had a lovely conversation. And I could already see God starting to work. He said, well, Pastor, I got to tell you something. Allie and I have been talking about Walnut Street. See, now they knew that we were praying for a pastor to come in, an associate pastor or a young pastor. And he said, I got to be honest with you, we've been praying for Walnut Street, and God has been drawing us toward it. Amen. I got a goosebump, you know. I said, I know. Trust me, folks, that's why you haven't heard anything much about this. It's a process. And I didn't want people to get all excited and say, oh, this is great, and then have it to just all fall apart. So Pastor Tim and I and the deacons talked about having him put in a formal application. We had to make one up. It's been a long time since we had an application for a pastor. But we did. Pastor Tim, I shouldn't say I did. Pastor Tim graciously pulled one together. We sent it out, and he sent it back. We talked. He wanted a couple weeks to pray about it. And I love the fact that he went to his pastor, who is also a professor at the college, and talked with him, sought it out, and then he sent the application back, and we got it. The next step for us was to talk further with him about entering into a formal period of time where we would be considering his references and all of that kind of thing. And we had asked him to not make an application to another ministry until we were able to process this and get. I didn't want to get halfway through this. We had this happen once. We got into the process, and the young man was snatched away by a bigger church. I understand that. So as the time goes through, we had his his references, and Pastor Tim and I were able to call, spend quite a bit of time on the phone with his references. Pastor Tim made a lot of notes, and we were both blown away by the quality of the truth that was coming back to us from these people. There was a college professor and pastor. There was the lady who works in the college business office who works directly with Allie and also has worked with Peter. And then there was a mentor of Peter's when how he got to ABC and all of that was through a family that really had a huge impact in his life, and we talked to them. I just can't tell you, folks, how thrilling it was to hear what these people had to say about this young man and his wife. Top quality young man. So, as that has proceeded, we have now come to the time where we want to present this to the church, not to vote on him as a pastor. We would just like to have a church vote to extend to them formally the opportunity to come and candidate. That would be the first step. If the church approves that, then we will set up a time for Peter and Allie and the kids to come. He would be able to speak to us. We would have some peripheral activities where you will be able to meet them and interact with them on a personal level. We've talked about how we're going to do that. That we will work out as time goes along. They actually graduate here the first week of May, and so the timing of this couldn't be better as far as their availability to come. So I would like to propose that next week, after the service, we have a vote to offer the opportunity to come and candidate. Now, what that entails. They would come, we would meet them, we would hear them. Then we would have a time to consider actually inviting them to come. We would have a meeting for that probably 2 weeks after they speak. And depending on how that goes, then from there we can begin that process. I only can say this, that I am humbled that God has answered our prayer. I think He has answered our prayer, obviously, in such a wonderful way. Finding quality, godly pastors today is a great challenge. Churches are closing all over the place because they can't find a pastor. And this is not just an ordinary person. I got to be careful because I'm so high on this. I really appreciate it. Anyway, I wanted to pause here. I asked Peter and his wife to give us just a little introduction to themselves. And so we have a little video we'd like to play for you today. I'm going to need to move this out of the way.